Welcome first-time listeners and returners to the Sports Deli. The Sports Deli is sponsored by SportRx. SportRx is the leader in sports prescription eyewear. You can find them online at sportrx.com, and don't forget to enter the code DELI10 at checkout for your special 10% discount. We also want to give props to PSK Collective. Be inspired in PSK, where their clothing promotes inclusivity, empowerment, and equality by supporting female athletes through the Women's Sports Foundation. You can find them online at pskcollective.com or at walmart.com. We also want to thank citylokes.com, where you can get your own personalized hats and phone cases, tees, accessories, and much, much more. I ordered 2 hats, and they're amazing. One of them says the Sports Deli, and it has a California license plate, and the other one has a Michigan license plate and says Speak Up and Dribble, Black Lives Matter. So check them out at citylokes.com, and don't forget to enter the code THESPORTSDELI at checkout for your special 10% discount. And we're so excited to finally be supporting Moolah Kicks. They're dropping in May of 2021. They are the first female-only brand basketball shoe, and you can find them online at Moolah. Moolah is Moolah, Kicks, like shoes, Kicks, plural, moolahkicks.com. Again, much thanks to Natty White, the founder of Moolah Kicks. You can always send us an email to thesportsdeli@gmail.com. And you can also DM us on Instagram at Mike Hootner or on Twitter at Michael Hootner. A little bit about Hootie Hoot. I coached college basketball for 23 years, 15 on the men's side and 8 on the women. And I now coach at a low-income, first-generation high school girls basketball here in San Diego. I played 4 years of college basketball. I'm a life coach. I have a beautiful daughter. I'm a professional basketball skills trainer. We love to share space with our guests here in the Sports Deli to talk about the intersection between race and sports, mental health and sports, equality, empowerment, empathy, leadership, education, sports, and solutions. We talk a lot about white privilege. We want to help mobilize, listen, learn, and pay it forward. Remember, your voice matters when fighting systemic racism. Read a book, acknowledge your white privilege, watch a movie about institutional racism, call your local or state representatives, and or have a conversation with someone that doesn't look like you. We have to change the economic, educational, police, housing, prison, and voting suppression narratives that currently need to be changed in this country. And the only way to do that is to listen and learn, and then help be a part of the mobilization and change that we want to see. We're so honored that you're joining us today, and we hope that you can grab your favorite deli sandwich or bagel and your favorite beverage, and let's do this together in the Sports Deli. We are so honored to share space today with Matt Doherty, who hails to us from Long Island's East Meadow, New York. He played for the legendary North Carolina coach Dean Smith and won a national championship in 1982, defeating the Georgetown Hoyas only a year after losing to Bobby Knight's Indiana Hoosiers in the 81 championship game on a jumper by a young Michael Jordan. And they did so in front of 63,000 fans some 39 years ago, the first ever Final Four in a domed stadium. He not only played alongside MJ, but big game James Worthy, Sam Perkins, Kenny Smith, and Brad Doherty. During his 4 years at North Carolina, he was a part of 117 wins and only 21 losses. He played in the 80 McDonald's All-American game, which included current Sixers coach Doc Rivers. That same year, his Holy Trinity High School team won the Class A New York State High School Boys Championship, and he shares a birthday with Kurt Rambis, Joakim Noah, and arguably the greatest pro wrestler of all time, Ric Flair.
Absolutely.
He began his coaching career with an AAU team before being an assistant at Davidson, where John will share his story and ask his question later about a former teammate of ours. And then at Kansas, before becoming a head coach at Notre Dame, of course, at North Carolina, FAU, and SMU. He worked as a bond salesman for 3 years, but hated it. He's been a color analyst and an associate commissioner of the A-10. He worked for the Indiana Pacers as a college scout and he's currently a part of his DLP. I just made that up. I don't know if that's what he calls it. The Doherty Leadership Practice. He does some executive coaching, speaks to corporations about leadership, and has a couple of weekly radio gigs in Charlotte. He also freely admits to missing coaching, referring to coaching as his drug, and doesn't rule out coaching again, saying, if we can have a 78-year-old president, I think I could be a head coach again at 58. Doherty's book, Rebound, From Pain to Passion, Leadership Lessons Learned, goes in depth about what he learned from his stormy 3-year tenure as UNC's basketball coach. It can be found at rebound-book.com, where you can use PayPal or Venmo to pay for the book, and the cost includes shipping. Him and his wife, Kelly, have 2 children. You can find him online on Instagram at MF Doherty. Doherty is Doherty, or on Twitter at Doherty Matt, where he has over 11,000 followers, or at letsengage.com/talent/Matt/Doherty. We are so honored that you're joining us, Coach. Thanks for coming and getting that karma in the sports deli.
Yeah, no, I love karma, ideally on rye. So, you know, I love delis, man. I grew up in Long Island. You know, I mean, Boar's Head. I mean, you get the heroes. You know, nothing like a New York deli.
Nothing like a New York deli. It's not like that in Detroit, but I grew up in Detroit. That's where I spent my first 18 years, and we had our version of Coney Island, and I'd get loose fries and a loose burger, you know, with the chili on top of the burger and the chili fries. And man, there was nothing like it during lunchtime.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. You look skinny. How'd you stay so skinny?
Genetics, I guess.
Yeah.
How you managing everything, Coach?
Yeah, good. Doing okay. Yeah, thank you.
Do you do some of your leadership things on Zoom or in person yet, or not yet?
We haven't gotten to person yet. Yeah, we're hoping to do that in June. Does this look okay?
Yeah, it looks great.
Love it.
Yeah, I like the book in the background,
cool,
by the way.
Oh, we were debating.
Yeah,
He saw it. That's good.
Yeah, good. There you go.
Of course, I saw that. Yeah,
That's good.
yeah, it's above the Fab Five.
That's right.
Yeah. Now you go by Hootie, or is
you can call me Hoot.
Hoot?
Hoot. Yep, you can call me Hoot.
Okay.
I've been called a lot of things over the years, especially by John.
Yes.
We played on the first team in the history of our school, small D3 school in Maryland, up the street from Johns Hopkins. So it's been an interesting ride ever since.
What school?
Goucher.
Oh yeah, I know Goucher. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
we have a story that connects you. We're going to tell it. I'm excited to see if you remember some of this stuff.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure he remembers, John.
I'm sure he does too.
How did you enjoy the bubble version of March Madness?
I thought it was great. Dan Gavitt and his staff at the NCAA did an amazing job pulling that off. It you know, great basketball. You know, the basketball early in the year was not good. I think the COVID impact on the preseason really hurt a lot of teams, but at the end of the year, the way Baylor was playing, they played beautiful basketball. They were fun to watch. Athletes that are basketball players, and that's hard to find, because sometimes you look for an athlete, but the athlete's not that skilled. They had skilled athletes that were smart players and played unselfish basketball, aggressive defense, and they were not going to be denied.
A couple things that I don't think I realized initially, and I probably should have, being a coach, but 4 of those guys didn't even start there. There was one at Presbyterian. You know, some of those guys were, you know, not either fitting into the previous programs, but just what Scott did, not only long term building that thing back up, but you know, and you don't always say that you love watching defense and it's exciting to watch. I mean, I rarely ever remember help and recover, hedge and recover, icing, you know, whatever they were doing. I mean, they were like beating them to the spot before they even got there and recovering. And it was amazing.
It really was. At times I thought they had 6 guys on the court. Gonzaga would pick and roll, and you'd see Timmy roll to the basket, and the weak side defender came out of the corner and helped, and then was able to recover and close out and contain the player with the ball. Really, just again, great athleticism, great schemes, executed, smart players. And as Scott Drew says, they try to play with the joy, and that was evident.
I was going to say, yeah, it was just, they obviously the game and the ramification of the game and the culmination of what could take place, factored in probably as extra incentive, but you could tell they had fun playing D.
They did. They
Yeah.
did. Especially Mitchell. That guy.
Wow.
Man, he is going to be a great pro. Butler's going to be a great pro. They really have Teague. They had guys. The shooting was unbelievable. They were so relaxed and confident. The 3-point shooting was really an amazing display.
So if you got back into coaching, is this sort of your Patino philosophy where you got to have 3.5 guys on the floor at once that can shoot the three, and obviously D, and this is like a model because they really could do it all. They didn't have many flaws at all.
I think you have to have 4. I think you really have to play 4 out, 1 in, with the ability to go 5 out, with your 5-man being able to handle the ball, pass, handle, and shoot. I played that way at North Carolina. I had Jawad Williams was my 4-man, really a big 3, if you will, and Sean May inside, and yet I could post some guards like Rashad McCants was one of our best post-up players. So you really take advantage of matchups, and I think that that's the way to play with the 3-point line, and the ability to drive, because hand checking is called all the time now. You can't put 2 hands on a guy. So if you have the lane jammed up, there's no driving lane. So you've got to spread the floor with shooters. And then also defensively, you have the ability to switch all pick and rolls, switch screens, which really makes it challenging on the offense to read the openings and create openings when you're switching pick and rolls and switching screens away from the ball.
Yeah. Go ahead,
Coach. Hootner talked about, the guys transferring in from Baylor, and, obviously Coach Williams retired this week. How much of it is the older coaches, if you will, the more experienced coaches, having to learn and understand about the transfer portal and how that has changed the whole recruiting? Because obviously back then when you were recruited, you had your team, you had your squad.
Yeah.
And even if it was one and done, you knew the one and done guys, you knew the guys that are probably going to be there 3 years and 4 years. And now you've got to have a whole other dimension to your recruiting aspect outside of once you get the kids already there.
I think you have to designate one person to the transfer portal. And a lot of coaches I know are not even really going to invest that much time in high school players. They're just going to recruit from the transfer portal, because you spend 2 or 3 years recruiting a high school player, and he shows up in let's say North Carolina, Walker Kessler leaves after 1 year. You've invested 3 years in recruiting them, and your return on the investment is not good. So if you get a kid in the transfer portal, technically he only transfer one time. Now you have him committed to your program. So I think you really have to spend at least 50% of your time on the transfer portal.
And just a follow-up there, I'm looking.
That's changed.
Yeah, I mean, one thing Hoot and I were also talking about.
And I'm going to interrupt.
Yeah.
It also impacts the way you play.
Explain
because if you have an intricate system, intricate offensive system, and you're recruiting off the transfer portal, or you only have guys for 1 or 2 years, I think you got to be dummy down your offense a little bit. Let's say to one extreme, the Princeton offense, which I ran at SMU for 2 years. Mm-hmm. That's an intricate offense that guys have to really spend a lot of time on to learn. And so, if you have guys that are leaving after a year, and then you have someone coming in, maybe you have 3 or 4 new players that are going to play right away, and they haven't been in that system before, that's really going to, really, hurt the progress of your team. So to go to more of a generic offense, the high pick and rolls, the simple maybe sets, the isolations, you might have to go more towards that versus the intricate motion offense. Even motion offense is hard to teach, and that's an acquired taste. And that takes 2 or 3 years for guys to really get good at, because especially now, kids aren't doing that growing up in basketball. They're doing the dribble drive, the pick and roll. So to have something like a true motion offense or the Princeton offense, I'd have to think twice if I would run that anymore.
Interesting. One other thing we were talking about is I do a little bit of the math here. There's about 700 kids in the transfer portal. And
there's more than that. There's, I think, 1,600 now.
Holy cow. Okay. So you know better than I. So 1,600 in transfer portal. And also the seniors can come back next year.
Right. The NCAA apparently has extended the scholarships so that if a kid does come back, and you have a freshman coming in or a freshman class, and let's say, they've given all their scholarships, a senior can come back and be on scholarship, so they can be over the 13 scholarship limit.
Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
So but still, that freshman now walks into a kid who's coming back who may have been a starter, and now he's not going to play. So he's not going to be happy. So he'll probably enter the transfer portal or try not to show up on campus and, transfer immediately before he even starts his freshman year.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. You just talked about the whole old school Bobby Knight versus the new school, sort of pick and roll and ISOs. And because one of our, Gordon that Gordon Kaplan, he and I talk all the time about end of game situations. Have you fouled enough to get the other team into the one and one? Those types of scenarios that, head coaches, at any level have to think about, so that you're thinking a little bit ahead in case of, possible scenarios. And he can't stand the way that the current game is being played. And as a professional basketball skills trainer, this is what I teach. I teach multitasking and stress management and body language and leadership. And I heard Gino Auriemma talk about this, that he's not adverse to skills trainers as long as they're teaching them how to win. And there's no replacement for 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 5-on-5, those types of things. What are your feelings about that?
I think kids now are more skilled with dribbling and shooting, but they don't know how to play team basketball because they are, everyone has a skills trainer.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's good for basketball.
We hope you're enjoying this incredible interview with Matt Doherty, former head men's basketball coach at the University of North Carolina. Over his coaching career, he had a 10-4 overall record in the postseason. He was named 2001 AP Coach of the Year. He won a national championship as a player at North Carolina under the legendary tutelage of Hall of Famer and legendary coach Dean Smith, where he played alongside Michael Jordan and beat the Georgetown Hoyas under head coach Big John Thompson. He will now discuss why he is so passionate about his philosophy that we need to get back to good old street ball. We hope you enjoy the next segment with Coach Doherty right here in the Sports Deli. So refill your beverage and kick your feet up on your lazy boy, and let's do this together in the Sports Deli.
I think kids need to be able to go out in the park and play 5-on-5 and learn how to play 5-on-5. Because, in the game, there's 9 other people on the floor. And you've got to be able to understand angles. You got to be able to stand spacing. I think that's a huge part of the game. And guys that just know how to dribble and shoot, that don't know how to play off the ball, don't know how to find cutters, don't know how to feed the post. Yep. That's not good. The other thing is they're not dealing with, in my book, Rebound from Pain to Passion, which you have in the background there, I talk about the park. And Bob McKillop, who was my high school coach, who's the head coach at Davidson, he and I talk about the park all the time. And the lessons you learn in the park are more than just basketball. It's leadership. It's accountability. It's taking instruction. It's following. It's playing with an older player who will teach you how to play. It's losing and sitting. You know, kids with individual workouts, they don't lose. They just work out. Kids that, you know, play AAU ball, they lose, and then there's a loser's bracket, and they walk away with a third place trophy. And, you know, there's always a game. So if you lose, you go to another bracket. And there's another game that afternoon, where in the park, if you lose, you sit. And that makes it hurt. That makes you really want to gut it out when it's point game.
Coach, tied into it, we've talked about this before. Do you think the high school kids and kids coming, they're so programmed now that there's no instincts, kind of what you're talking about? When you go to the park, you have instincts. There's no set plays really. You're going on feel. Maybe you've played with guys before. Maybe you know the court and those type of things. And I think some of that's been lost. That, you know, everything's been these kids are so programmed. At 5 o'clock we're going here. To your point, at 7:30 we play in the winner or losers bracket. You know, everything's so programmed down to the last minute. These kids can't think on their own sometimes.
Well, it goes back to, you know, who's organizing it. The parents, the coaches are organizing it. So they're not thrust in leadership roles. Right. If you go to the park and play ball and there's 12 players there, the 2 best players decide to choose sides. And then inevitably there's 2 players not playing. So right away, those 2 players know that my peers don't think I'm good enough. Right. Yeah. And then there's a foul called, and then there's a debate, and they settle the debate amongst themselves. A referee doesn't settle it. Right. The parent doesn't settle it. And then somebody else comes into the park and says, who's got next? Mm-hmm. And, you know, someone raises their hand and says, well, okay, I'm with you guys. And they debate that. And then when the team loses, you pick up the two of the better players that lose. Right. So now those other 3 players are like, damn, he doesn't think I'm good enough. Right. And so then when it's point game on the court, the leader is the coach. So he's coaching the other players and saying, hey, get your butt over in the corner, or set a better screen, or that's a terrible shot. So there's no leadership among peers in AAU ball. Right. Or it's very rare, because they don't want to hurt the other kid's feelings. Right. Because not everyone, a lot of kids are soft. Right. And then the parents get mad saying my kid didn't get enough shots, so they go to another AAU team.
It's a brilliant point. And John said it. We've talked about this a lot, that there's no substitute for going to the park and the feelings that accompany whatever happens. You know, lessons learned in the park. I'm from Detroit. So, you know, and I was the only white guy on my varsity team in high school. And I had to earn it. I got cut 3 times before I made the team, and I sat the bench as a senior even then, and I was pissed off and had to work even harder to make my junior college team before, you know, I went to Goucher. So, you know, you got to have a why. Right. And a lot of times you can't learn that why if you're handed everything to you your whole life.
And Gordon, our friend Gordon, jokes that he became a good free throw shooter because that was the only way he knew he'd get in the game. Because remember back in the day, the first 5 to make their free throws were one team, and then if you had 20 guys there, you know, and he knew, look, if I make that free throw, I'm in. I've set my own destiny, and then I'm going to feed the guy to stay on. You know, if I'm not the best scorer, you're going to feed the guy to stay on. You know, and we've lost some of that now.
We've lost a lot of it. We've lost a lot of it, no question, and. You know, in spite of it, it's still a great game, but the nuances, the leadership, the accountability, the mental toughness, dealing with failure, and truth tellers. And I talk about that in my book, Dealing with Failure. I talk about truth tellers. There's not a lot of truth being told to these kids because everyone's sucking up to them because they want to be in their group. So if that kid makes it to the pros, they benefit from that, as opposed to someone telling them, hey, you're not a good 3-point shooter, or that's a terrible shot. That's what these kids need. But since they can slide from one AAU team to the next, or one high school to the next, or one college to the next, they're not embracing the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So let's tie that in a little bit to you growing up. Obviously, the game is a little bit different. Toughness never goes away. There's some aspects that always are required that allow you to fit into any program, any system. So how was it growing up, on Long Island, and how were some of your experiences at the park, and how did you earn your respect? Obviously, you were taller, right?
Yeah, I was taller. I was skilled. In sixth grade, I read a book by Bill Bradley called Life on the Run. And Bill Bradley was a great player for the Knicks.
Yeah.
And he said, if somebody is out there working harder than you, when you two meet, that player will have the advantage. And right then I quit Little League baseball.
Wow.
And the thing I love about basketball is I could outwork you by dribbling and shooting. And working on my game. In baseball, you need somebody else. In football, you need somebody else. Hockey, you need somebody else, for the most part. But in basketball, I don't need anybody else. So I could be the first one to the park, at 8 in the and work on my game. When other kids are going to the beach, I'm working on my game. It's 100 degrees out. Playing full court one-on-one with some of my buddies at the park. That to me was a huge part of my love for the game of basketball. And I always wanted I didn't want to have a weakness. So even though I was the tallest player in my grade, I always wanted to play up, because I figured if I'm playing against older guys in the park, now I'm playing out on the perimeter. I can handle the ball. I'm working on guarding on the perimeter. I'm working on my outside shot. So then when I do play on my school team, I'll have a huge advantage, because I played against high school and college players when I'm in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and I get the crap beat out of me. But I knew that I had to be tough, because if I wasn't tough, they wouldn't want me on the court. And then I had to listen. Listening's a talent like running and jumping. So if I'm listening to these guys and they're saying, hey, that's a bad shot, or sprint back on defense, or set a good screen, and I do it, they'll want me to play with them because I help them win.
That's pretty forward thinking, because back in the day, if you were a good rebounder, or you could post up, you could distribute the ball, that's all you needed to do. Whereas now, that's not necessarily enough. Did you ever thank Bill Bradley for his book?
I never
what he
met
did
Bill
for you?
Bradley. I saw him up close
Wow.
one time. I was recruiting Nick Collison for Kansas. And we were at the state tournament in Iowa City, maybe. And they had half moon backboards.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think it was in Des Moines, and a great high school event. And Bill Bradley was running for, I think, president at the time for the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And he was there, politicking. And so he was surrounded by a group of people, but I couldn't go up to him, but I would love to. He and that Knick team in the 69 to 72 era was really, really
magical.
Made an impression on me.
Yep.
So I want to ask you a question. I've been listening to Chris Johnson a lot lately on KJ Live, and Jelani McCoy's coming on, Ray Young. We've had Lav on. And one of the things that I've learned, and maybe this is true with all programs, but it just seems it's a little bit different with the 4 letters on the front of their jersey, UCLA, and the brotherhood, no matter what year you played for UCLA, just seems to be, whether it's from Tyus Edney to, the current players and everybody in between. Is it like that with the University of North Carolina, where there's a brotherhood that's an unspoken connection, that you can always reach out to them? And I asked this for a couple of different reasons, but I just wondered, is there that, no matter who you are, what era you played in, that there's that brotherhood that's unspoken, and there's just a special, unique magic about it?
Well, a couple of things. I think ours is stronger than UCLA's.
Yes, it's true.
And I think ours is spoken. It's not unspoken. We talk about it all the time, the Carolina family. Mm-hmm. And I think a big part of that is that there's been so much continuity between from Frank McGuire in the 50s. Dean Smith was his assistant at the end of his career. And then Dean Smith was there for 36 years, and Bill Guthridge was there for 3. And Bill Guthridge was his assistant for 30 years. And then I was there for 3. And I played for Coach Smith and Coach Guthridge. And then Roy Williams takes over, and Roy Williams was an assistant for Dean Smith for 10 years. And I worked for Roy Williams for 7, and now Hubert Davis. So there's been a family member coaching there. Where at UCLA, they've had to go outside the family, if you will. And I think that impacts it a little bit, because it's so important that a coach know the culture of the university, as long as that coach is a good coach. You don't want to just hire a guy because he played there. But, in the case of Hubert, he's been there as an assistant for 9 years. And he knows what it means to wear that jersey, so he could sell it to recruits. And, that's been the case with Coach K now. Coach K has had nothing but Duke former players as his assistants, and the same thing that Coach Williams has done recently. So that culture, that brotherhood is real. Like, some of my best friends are players that played at North Carolina on different teams than mine, from Mitch Kupchak to Michael Corrin to Shammond Williams to George Lynch.
So, Coach, real interesting thing. I ran into Mitch. I'm a Bullets fan. I grew up in D.C. So I ran into Mitch Kupchak he was scouting at a University of South Carolina basketball game, and I ran into him. And I said, "You're Mitch Kupchak." And I'm sure he was ready to hear, I'm a North Carolina fan or I'm a Laker fan. And I said, "I just want to thank you for helping the Washington Bullets win their one world championship." And he was just in shock. He died laughing. He goes, "I got to be honest, I haven't heard that one in a while." I mean, so it was interesting. I'm curious, can you talk about the recruiting process when you were being recruited by Coach Smith, and how that differed or was similar, or probably different from how you recruited by other places, and what got you to go from Long Island to North Carolina?
Well, Coach Smith had a tradition of recruiting New Yorkers. I mean, right. Frank McGuire did.
Sure.
So there was a long history of New Yorkers going to the University of North Carolina, one of them being Mitch Kupchak, who's from Long Island, Chris Brust from Long Island. Larry Brown went to high school in Long Island. And so, it was not uncommon. Jimmy Black was from New York City.
Right.
So, and then the other thing is, I wanted to play in a league. The Big East was just getting formed in '79. The ACC was the best basketball conference. And then I thought that Coach Smith would appreciate what I could do. I knew what I wasn't. I wasn't a great athlete, but I was a fundamentally sound and a skilled player, a smart player. And so I knew he'd appreciate that. And then the recruiting back then was mostly done through the high school coach.
Right.
I played AAU ball for the Riverside Church, but most of recruiting back then was done through your high school teams. We had summer leagues. They'd come see your team play in a summer league. There weren't any limitations, I don't think, on the number of times they could be out. And then, I kind of knew where I wanted. I narrowed my choices the summer before my senior year. And, he came into my home, and I think the thing was he was really relaxed. And when the topic of playing time came up, he said, you'll be lucky to play by the time you're a junior. Where the other coaches, implied that I'd play as a freshman.
Yep.
And I remember leaning forward, and I said to myself, I'll show you. And so I took that as a challenge. And I think he did that for a couple of reasons. He wanted players that weren't afraid of a challenge. Mm-hmm. And he also wanted to be loyal to the players that were already in the program, that he's not going to promise a kid that hadn't played a game yet anything. And that's evident by the picture behind your back, John.
Yep.
Michael Jordan isn't on the front cover of that Sports Illustrated cover because he hadn't played a game yet.
Right.
So I just want to touch on MJ. Matt has said in the past that MJ was obviously very cocky, Most of us saw The Last Dance, or a lot of us did anyway, during the pandemic, that talked about the Bulls and Michael Jordan. And obviously, Matt had firsthand knowledge about Michael, being around him all the time and seeing how competitive he was. He was always trash talking and teasing, whether it was about hair or clothes. Everything was competitive. But he was also really kind, Matt said. He had amazing parents. Obviously, it was very unfortunate what happened to his father. He had an older brother that was also a very good player, shorter, but a very good player that he learned a lot from. And MJ once wrote Matt's mom a handwritten letter. Such a kind gesture. But Matt said that it really wasn't rocket science. He said that Michael was just a great person. He wrote the foreword to his book that we talked about earlier and that we'll talk about a little bit later as well. But good kids come from good parents. And Michael's parents were great parents, he said. He remembered one time when there was an Ezekiel festival in Wilmington, and Michael's family let him stay there with him. And obviously he was super competitive all the time in practice. We've heard the legendary stories about him being competitive, whether it's gambling or, just about anything. You'll hear a story later about Michael and Coach Doherty golfing together. But he told a story where Michael would point to someone in the locker room before practice at North Carolina. And that basically meant that they were going to get dunked on that day. So there's just a lot of neat stories that he had about Mike, which everyone's always interested in. I'm sure he learned a lot about leadership from Mike as well. And if somebody did have a good day against MJ, that they better not show him up, because obviously he could take things to a whole nother level. But he said one of the things that he didn't realize when Mike came in as a freshman was how unbelievably athletic he was. He said he was able to do things that he had never seen before. His ability to hang in the air and to spin the ball in so many different ways was just remarkable, not to mention his defense. He said he was just an incredible defender even back then. Fast forward to when Coach Doherty was the head coach at North Carolina and resigned or was sort of forced out or let go. He said he got a long voicemail from MJ, and he was really pissed. He thought he could have stayed on and turned the ship around, but obviously it wasn't in the cards. And one of the other things that Coach Doherty mentioned was because there was a little bit of turmoil, a little bit of tension between the Carolina faithful and maybe the coaching family. And he said Roy Williams did a really nice thing. Now, when Matt came back in 2018 for the dedication of the Roy Williams Court, he said he did something he didn't have to do. And in the coach's locker room, they have a coach's locker room at North Carolina. He put pictures on the wall of all the coaches, right? Just a coach's locker room, just for the coaches to go to and either change if they're going to go work out or, just a separate locker room from the main locker room, just for the coaches. And he just thought it was such a nice gesture for him to put, Frank McGuire and then Dean Smith, obviously, and Bill Guthridge and himself, Matt, Doherty had his picture on the wall, and obviously now Roy Williams and Hubert Davis will be on that wall as well. But he just said that it made him feel so good because he said it was really hard for him to, come back to be the head coach of North Carolina and, in a lot of ways be a disappointment. And to now come back sort of full circle and be in the good graces of that Carolina family, so to speak, in that coaching fraternity, in North Carolina circles, in the brotherhood, was really special to Matt. So we hope that you enjoyed part 1 of this amazing interview with Matt Doherty, a former teammate of Michael Jordan and former head coach at North Carolina, who currently does leadership training as a part of his DLP, Doherty Leadership Practice, where he does executive coaching and speaks to corporations about leadership, and also does a couple of radio gigs in Charlotte. He hopes to get back into coaching one day on the actual hardwood, in addition to his leadership practice. And we hope that you enjoy part 2 of this amazing interview with Coach Matt Doherty right here in the Sports Deli. Remember, please mask up. Black Lives Matter. Peace.